What if your next cruise choice came down to Mickey or Minions? This week, Universal's rumored leap into the cruise market is sending waves throughout the industry, and Disney fans are watching closely. Also, a TikTok stunt gets one influencer permanently banned from Carnival, Royal Caribbean teases a new mysterious ship class, and a squall nearly sends an MSC ship adrift while guests were still on shore. Plus, a cruise workers Reddit Ask Me Anything goes viral for revealing exactly what drives crew crazy and which guests they secretly love. Which one are you? Hi, I'm Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ship. So let's get into this week's biggest cruise headlines. Imagine this: character breakfast with Gru, late night trivia in Hogwarts robes, and Jurassic Park sail-away parties. Well, it might sound like a fanfic fever dream, but new business documents suggest Universal might be planning a full-scale cruise line. Quiet filings and NDA conversations with the Port of Galveston hint at a launch around 2031, with itineraries that mirror Disney Cruise Line routes in the Caribbean and the Bahamas. And that's no accident. If you've ever struggled to find a family-friendly cruise that isn't Disney, or you just wanted a more adventurous, slightly edgier theme at sea, this could be a game changer. Now, here's my take. Universal's not just dipping a toe in. With Epic Universe opening soon and Halloween Horror Nights going now year-round in Vegas, they're building out not just a brand, but an empire. And a cruise line, well, that could be the floating finale. So I want to know what you think. Is this exciting to you? Do you have any interest on sailing on a Universal ship? Or is Disney still the gold standard? Or do you avoid all of the themey stuff entirely and you go mainstream? Let me know in the comments. And speaking of viral choices, let's talk about a dumb thing that got someone banned from Carnival for life. If you missed this news, a TikTok user posted a video after her Carnival cruise bragging about this secret hack she had to circumvent those pricey drink packages. So what she did was that she was bragging about sneaking alcohol on board hidden in toiletry bottles. And she even joked that this was a way to beat the drink package system. And as you know, I get frustrated with the cruise lines nickel and diming us to death, especially now post-COVID and trying to recover from COVID. But friends, this ain't it. We don't want to break the rules and do things like this. And she learned this the hard way. Well, Carnival monitors social media. They see the things that we talk about. They see the things that we post, especially when it goes viral. So the punchline to this joke, they banned her for life. Now, she now claims that it was fake. She just pretended to smuggle alcohol on board, that just in video you can't tell it's really alcohol, and that it was just for clout and just for views. But Carnival takes this thing very seriously. Now, some are even questioning if this happened at all, and they're saying that this influencer made up this ban and faked this letter. But what the truth is, who knows exactly. But still, this person shared on Facebook that she received an official dreaded do not sail letter. She shared it on Facebook from Carnival, citing her violation of cruise policy and telling her that if she did try to book in the future, they would be canceled without refund. So Carnival for her is now a no-go forever. Now, this story blew up and it did divide cruisers. Most of them do think that this was a dumb move. She shouldn't have done this. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. But others think that this is too harsh. And I want to know what you think. Are the cruise lines getting out of hand with the nickel and diming? Do they deserve these types of money-saving hacks? And is this something that you would consider doing? Or do you think this is dumb? Or would you do it, but you're just smart enough not to post about it and brag about it online? Regardless of what you think though, here's the lesson and the moral of this little story. Don't pose cruise hacks that involve breaking rules. Even if it's retroactive, even if you're off the ship, off the sailing, you think you're good, because Carnival does monitor social media and you don't want this to happen to you. If you think every new cruise ship has to be a floating city, as these cruise ships just get bigger and bigger, and every week I talk about this, every week I break news about a cruise line that has a new mega ship. And that's definitely the trend, that's definitely the norm. But not in all cases. So I've got some good news if you are a mega ship hater and you like those smaller, more intimate cruise ships. Royal Caribbean's Vicky Freed just confirmed that the cruise line is in active design meetings for a brand new Royal Caribbean ship class, smaller than their Icon class. And it's under hush-hush, and it's an initiative called Project Discovery. So what's the goal here? Because yeah, the trend is bigger is better. These ships are getting out of control. Royal Caribbean now has Star of the Seas. MSC just launched World America. These ships are just getting bigger and bigger. So what's the goal here? Now, the goal is something that the mega ships can't do. Megaships cannot get to a lot of ports of call. Now think of this as a boutique Royal Caribbean experience. You still get most of the brand's tech and innovation and the whole vibe of the Royal Caribbean experience, but you don't get all those bells and whistles. Instead, the Discovery class will be scaled for intimacy and those more exotic locations. I just got home from a Mediterranean cruise. We went to 7 amazing ports of call in Europe, most of them pretty small. There's no way a ship like Icon could ever get me to places like this. So I personally value these smaller ships for this purpose. And it's frustrating as a cruiser because in this move for cruise lines to go bigger, bigger, bigger all the time, it's hard to find itineraries to these more exotic cruise port locations that are smaller ports without it being on an old, small, dated ship that needs some refreshing. So having the opportunity to sail these more niche ports in a nicer, newer ship is very much good news for me, but I want to know what you think. Now, it's a little early, no orders have been placed yet, and no designs have been made public, but this is starting to feel like a little bit of a pivot, and one, like I said, that I personally welcome. This is maybe a signal that in the age of megaships, size isn't always everything, and bigger is not always better, and bigger isn't always what everybody wants. So if Royal starts to reclaim that small ship space, that is big news. But let me know what you think. Does ship size matter, and is bigger always better? Or do you like it a little smaller? Meanwhile, over in the Bahamas, Mother Nature showed cruisers who's boss. While docked at Ocean Key, which is MSC's private island, it's amazing, by the way. I have a free port guide if you want to check it out. I'll drop the link in the comments. But guests on MSC Seascape were docked at Ocean Key, and they were hit by a surprise squall. Winds ripped through the mooring lines, and the ship's bow went adrift, just as passengers were returning from the island. Now, if you've never been here, thankfully it's not a tender port. That would have been really problematic. It's a pier, and thankfully it's a nice small pier. So getting from the island to the ship isn't as difficult as it could be at some other private island locations. So that was a blessing here. The other blessing is that crew responded really quickly. And as a result of their quick action, only minor injuries were reported and the ship was quickly secured. But I tell you, that video footage, it is wild. You see gangways separating, you see people running for cover, and this is what happens sometimes on a cruise. We always want beautiful, calm weather and sunshine, but the reality is Mother Nature can't be controlled. And this is not about poor planning. MSC did nothing wrong here at all. Even ships that have million-pound mooring lines, they can struggle in freak weather like this, especially when they're docked, because that's their vulnerable position. So I want to know if this kind of thing freaks you out. Is weather a consideration for you when you cruise, or are you going to sail and cruise anywhere, everywhere, no matter what? Personally, I've cruised through and around a hurricane 2 times. It wasn't actually that bad, so it doesn't scare me. But what do you think? Now, over on Reddit, we have another story unfolding. A cruise crew member opened up about life behind the guest services desk. Now, every cruise, I loved talking to crew. I'm fascinated about ship life. Personally, you couldn't pay me enough to ever work on a ship, but I'm intrigued by what their lives are like. And a lot of times, they're pretty close-lipped. They don't want to risk jeopardizing their job by sharing too much with guests. So seeing this open and direct honesty, it was, let's say, enlightening. So let me share with you the pet peeves that this person shared. Of course, they don't like guests who are proverbial Karens. No offense to people named Karen, it's a lovely name. But they're guests who demand to speak to the manager before letting staff solve the issue. And as a frequent cruiser who cruises monthly, I can tell you every time I've had to go to guest services for something, there is always a fellow cruiser just ripping a new one into one of these crew members. And so try not to be that person. Now, their wildest moment, a drunk passenger who decided to strip in the atrium and had to be removed by security. If you're curious about what this person thinks is the biggest perk of the job, it's real gratitude. And it's that you don't tip in dollars, but what they really like is when guests show kindness and appreciation. That, and of course, guests who do tip in cash too. Because in fact, guest services folks don't really get included in those automatic or prepaid or built-in gratuities. Now, this AMA has sparked a conversation. And if you don't know what an AMA is, it means Ask Me Anything. It's a popular format over on Reddit, which is a discussion board. And people will either anonymously or upfront say, here's who I am, ask me anything, what questions do you have about my life or my job? But this AMA in particular has sparked a conversation that cruisers need to have. Are we treating people well? Are we being nice to the crew and to the staff? And are we sometimes contributing to these bad behaviors that sometimes give cruise people a bad name? So I wanted to know what you think about onboard behavior, particularly what you've seen in terms of how cruisers interact with the staff, and then also that controversial hot button issue of tipping on board. Do you think that the prepaid or built-in included required gratuities, is that enough? Do you choose to tip beyond that? I want to know what you think down in the comments. And finally, the politics of cruise ship registration, they're back in the spotlight. The current administration has floated a potential crackdown on what are called flags of convenience. And if you don't know what that is, that's that fun little legal loophole that allows cruise lines to register their ships in countries like Panama or the Bahamas. And of course, they do that intentionally to avoid strict labor laws and higher taxes, like here in the United States. If you take a cruise, always look at the flag that the ship is flying on the exterior, and that will tell you where it's registered. And it's also written on the ship itself, too. Now, this is common in the cruise industry. All the cruise lines do this. They always have since the early days of cruising, but critics say it's unethical. Cruise executives say, well, it's business as usual. This is how it's always been, and cargo ships do the same, so why shouldn't we? So if it's enforced, and if this administration starts to crack down on this loophole, that could mean some major tax changes for mainstream lines like Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Princess, and others. Now, stocks dipped briefly after the announcement, but they have since rebounded. Still, it's a reminder, the cruise industry doesn't just float on water, it floats on some complex and often borderline shady laws and loopholes. And I love cruising. I'm obviously a big fan of cruising, but this is one of those things about cruising that kind of grinds my gears. And related to this is, in my opinion, their exploitation of labor. There's a reason too why on a cruise ship you often don't see American workers, and if they are, they're in the higher paid positions like cruise director, entertainment director, or the entertainers, because cruise lines use these loopholes to circumvent US labor laws, and therefore they don't want to hire US employees. They want to pay lower paid workers where they don't have to comply with US labor laws. So these are a couple things about cruising that I think do deserve some scrutiny, and I personally would like to see some change. Now, of course, I know if change happens, that probably means higher prices for us cruisers, so it goes both ways, but I want to know what you think. Do you think cruise lines should pay their fair share of taxes? Should they comply with US labor laws? And are those things worth it if it means higher fares for you and for me? So that's your cruise news roundup for the week. From banned influencers to Universal's rumors of entering the market, one thing is clear: the cruise world, it is never ever boring. But I want to know what you think about these stories and anything I may have missed. So drop a comment and let's talk ship. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on those notifications. I do this every week, so if you love cruise stuff and you love talking ship, I'm your girl.